Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Catholic Masterclass. We're embarking on a new section in our class. Last section, let's go all the way back to the beginning. We just looked at the basics, like what is worship? What is Mass? Why do we have Mass? Why do we have structure to our worship? And then from there, we looked at the connections between Old Testament worship and New Testament worship, seeing how what Jesus does is truly new. Of course, he calls it the New Covenant. But it is not so new that it's disconnected with what's old. In fact, it's connected with what's old. We looked at Jewish temple worship and how it was ultimately brought forward by Jesus, elevated and perfected, and then given to us to engage in our worship, and all the different really neat connections that we see in our Catholic Mass that are connected with Old Testament worship. And of course, they're not perfect matches all the time, but we saw a bunch of those connections. You can go back and check out those episodes. Now we're shifting into a new section, which is looking at a lot of the things that we see and experience before Mass, and things that we experience at Mass, but like things that, like this is what's in my mind. We all know the things that we would expect to see at Mass. If they weren't there, it would be really strange. For example, if the priest was not wearing his vestments, for example, it would be really strange to not see that. And so we know the certain things to expect and to see, but what I've experienced as a priest is that most people, many people anyways, don't understand why we have the things that we have or why we do the things that we do. So I'm going to spend a bunch of weeks just looking at some of the really basic things, and then finally we'll end up getting into the Mass. But I know it's taken us a long time, and I've been saying this from the beginning, but the intention here is to just go nice and slow so that we can come to a deeper understanding of everything that we do at Mass. So that's the idea. Okay. What I want to focus on first is actually something that takes place before Mass, before you even come to Mass, in fact, probably. Some people might come to Mass really early and pray beforehand, and that's really great. Actually, it's a really good practice. We'll talk about that down the road. But for most people, for the average person, the thing that I want to talk about first begins while you're still at home. Or if you have a long drive to Mass, the thing that begins in your car, which is the hour-long fast that is required for us before receiving Holy Communion. And this is actually something, fasting before receiving Holy Communion is something that goes back a long time, maybe even back to the first days of the church. For sure, we have documents from St. Augustine, who lived in the 300s, where he actually writes about this. He says how pleasing it is to the Holy Spirit that Christians would honor Jesus's real body and blood in the Eucharist, has his real presence in the Eucharist. They would so honor the Eucharistic presence of the Lord so as to not allow any other food to enter in their mouths before the Blessed Sacrament. That's what he saw. So Christians would honor the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist by not consuming food or drink before they receive the Holy Eucharist on the day that they receive the Holy Eucharist. And then for sure, we know by the 6th century at least, maybe even before then, but by the 6th century at least, there was a requirement that those who were going to receive Holy Communion would not eat or drink anything prior to receiving Holy Communion, which actually can give some credence or some understanding maybe to why there's actually a pretty strong tradition of having Mass very early in the morning. You think of, if you've ever been to a big city, like there's going to be a parish around that has like a 6:30 a.m. Mass on Sunday. And it's like, wow, why do they have it so early? I suppose there's a connection. Well, one, it's just they want to provide an opportunity for people who maybe are really busy or something. But then there may also be a connection with that sense of, I'm not going to eat it or drink anything before I receive my Lord in Holy Communion. This is also part of the reason why Christians have not always received communion when they go to Mass. Of course, we've talked a little bit about mortal sin and how if I've committed a mortal sin, I should not receive Holy Communion because St. Paul says that I'm eating and drinking judgment upon myself. But there's another aspect of, I want to be prepared, and I don't always feel prepared. Maybe because I actually want to fast, and I haven't, and so I'm not going to receive communion today. So anyway, so that's something. Okay, so actually from the 6th century all the way till 1957, that was the law, to not eat or drink anything prior to receiving Holy Communion, from midnight onwards. And then in 1957, Pope Pius XII changed the law so that the fast became a 3-hour fast, so that a person could not eat or drink anything except water prior to receiving Holy Communion for 3 hours. And then in 1964, Pope Paul VI changed it again to just a 1-hour fast, so you think about this, like before it was from midnight onward As long as it took, if you went to an early morning mass or a later morning mass, or they probably didn't have many evening masses back then, if any, so like there was like, okay, I got many hours. And then it was just 3 hours, and now it's just 1 hour. And then what's more, you think of, if you go to a Catholic mass on Sunday, you probably don't receive Holy Communion. You don't start distributing Holy Communion until like 40 minutes into the Mass. So really it's like 20 minutes ahead of time. But nonetheless, the point that I want to make first, and we'll get into that other part first, second, but the point I want to make first is that it is still a law, a requirement, that a person cannot receive Holy Communion if he or she has eaten or drinking anything other than water, such as like coffee, within an hour prior to the distribution of Holy Communion, or when that person would receive Holy Communion. And if you don't receive communion that day, it's not necessarily because you've committed a mortal sin, but it's because you recognize, I haven't really prepared myself for the Lord. It's a small act of self-denial. Like this is the second point here, is that what we're consuming when we're talking about Holy Communion, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, we're not talking about something that is ordinary food. Clearly, like this is extraordinary food. The living presence, the living and real presence of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist, because it is so extraordinary, it calls for intentional preparation, even in a spirit of self-denial, like a small amount of self-denial. Think of like an hour prior to receiving Holy Communion. Because why? I want to be so aware of the Lord's presence entering into my body that I want to prepare a place that has been, in some ways, like purified, in some ways that has just been prepared intentionally, to show that this moment truly does have meaning for me in what it is that I'm consuming, who it is that I'm consuming. So that's the reason for the hour-long fast, to just like recognize, like I'm okay denying myself a little bit for the sake of the one who denied himself a whole lot. He denied himself all the way to the end. That's what I want to do, and it's just a way for me to express that I want to be prepared to receive my Lord. If I go to a Sunday Mass, it's really not that hard because it's only like 20 minutes before, and for a lot of people that's just like from the time you get into your vehicle until you receive Holy Communion, don't eat or drink anything except water. If you're going to like a daily Mass, which tends to be shorter, then you got to kind of plan it out a little bit more ahead of time to try to. But I love that idea, actually. I love that idea, is that a person wakes up and he just plans his entire morning around the thought of, okay, when am I going to receive Holy Communion today? When am I going to receive my Lord? And so I want to plan what I do, what I eat, what I drink around that entire moment, because that entire moment is the highlight of not just my morning, not just my day, but the highlight of my week. I love that. I love that idea. Now with this, there are a couple of exceptions. So you may be wondering, like, okay, are there any exceptions to this? Yes. If a person is sick and needing to take medicine, and some medicines require that you eat food so that you don't like pass out or faint. And so if that's the case, then the church is like, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. For the sake of your health and well-being, it's okay to have medicine. And if you need to have a little bit of food to go along with that, even within the hour long, then you're free to do so. Other exception is pregnant women. Pregnant women, we know their bodies go through all kinds of different things when they're pregnant because their bodies are just changing and they're fostering life within them. And so the church says that pregnant women, because of the well-being of their own bodies as well as the well-being of the child, they may be free to break the fast for the sake of that child, for the sake of that body, that woman's body. So those are the exceptions. Other exceptions, I think, are probably not really there. But anyway, it's the whole point here is like, can I deny myself by showing honor to the body and blood of the Lord? Can I deny myself just a little bit so that I can actually, if I feel hungry, I can let myself hunger for the goodness of the Eucharist. That's the kind of place that I want to be in. So I hope that's helpful for you, that to know, like, well, one, if you don't know that there's a fast required, I know some people are not aware of that you know that there is a fast required. But two, if you're wondering, like, gosh, what's the point of this whole thing? The point is to be intentional about our preparation for receiving our Lord in the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Him in the Eucharist. So I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Peace.